Okay. So I've been asked a lot of questions about Osnium in general, how to enter things, just kind of asking for a 101 training. So that's kind of what today is going to be. So it might be a refresher for some or new information for others, but we're going to go over how to create a client, how to enter what's called an activity, um, formerly called like a service, how to do an intake on a client, how to enter a stay and exit for a shelter client, how to enter a hotline call, both for an existing client and for somebody who hasn't received our services before, what the events tab is and how to enter an event, and then how to run reports through Osnium. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Before I get started on that, I already sent out the September schedule and I already wrote in the email on there, but just a reminder, blank reminder for everybody on day staff. Please remember to fill out and share your online calendars with each other and myself so that when I schedule meetings like this, I know what everybody's availability is and I'm not scheduling something on a day that you have appointments. So please make sure that you are filling that out as complete as possible, and making sure that it's shared with me and then other day staff too, in case a client calls for you during a time in which you are busy. A couple of other things. The National Domestic Violence Count Day is on September 10th. So that means you need to make sure that everything that you do on the 10th is recorded completely in Osnium so that I can use this for funding and data reporting purposes later. Like I said, this is nationally recognized. So I will have stuff that will be due by the end of that week. So please make sure that that is something that you prioritize on that day. And then the next staff meeting is scheduled for the 29th of September, once again at that 2 p.m. mark. Did anyone have any questions about the schedule in general? Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see Osnium on the screen now?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So right now we're kind of looking at the person list in Osnium. So this is all of our clients and abusers and children that we have. So some of these people are the abusers, some of these people are our clients, and then some of these people are going to be the children of our clients. To make a new client, you go over to the new section up here. It looks like a little piece of paper. Hit the down arrow and do new client. So from here, you can see that some of these fields are outlined in red. If they're outlined in red, that means that they are necessary and you have to fill those in. If you try to save the file before filling in any of these red fields, you're not going to be able to do that. So you need to make sure that all of the areas that are highlighted in red are completed. So we're just going to make a client up, obviously, for this training, and then I'll delete it later. You're going to see that I have options as an administrator that you're not going to have. So don't get too confused. For example, like you're not having the ability to delete anything. So if you make a mistake on one of your entries, sometimes you can edit it, and sometimes you'll need to just let me know, and then I'll have to delete that file for you, which is not a big deal as long as you document it so that I can make sure I'm deleting the right one. So for this person, we're just going to say that the intake date is today. And then for training purposes, we'll just say the agency ID, which is their client file number, is going to be like 4,800. The client status, they're either active or inactive. Active means that we've had contact with them in the last year, and inactive means that we have not have contact with them in the last year. Usually these are updated around Christmas time because that's when we kind of go through and look at who we've talked to in the past year to give Christmas gifts to anyway. So that gives it, that's the ideal opportunity to kind of decide who we're going to keep as active and who we're going to make inactive. Another thing about Osnium is that Osnium will automatically assign everybody with what's called a person ID. A person ID is unique to Osnium. It has nothing to do with us. So don't mistake that for their agency ID or their client file number, because that's not what that is. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. So first name is usually their first name, whatever they decide that's going to be. If they have a full first name, make sure you do like their legal first name instead of say a nickname or anything like that. Last name would be like their legal last name or what you would see on an ID. So for this, we'll just do Jane Doe. For middle name, if they put their middle name, great. If they don't, that's fine. So we'll just say this person's middle name, they just put I for an initial. And alternative names, this is where you would put, say, nicknames, or if they're married, maybe their maiden name. So maybe this person's maiden name was Stevenson. And then their date of birth. Sometimes people don't always put their complete date of birth, or we might not know it. So what we can do is we can estimate the date of birth based on how old they are, and if we know at least the month. So we'll say that this person was born on 1/1, because we don't know the exact date, 1987. And we'll say that it was estimated because we're not really sure or not. You can see that some of these fields fill in automatically in the demographic section. So gender will always automate to female. If you want to change it, you have to make sure to press this arrow down here and then choose from one of the options presented. So female, male, no single, gender, other, refused, trans female, trans male. So for this option, I'm just choosing trans female. The race, again, this autofills to white. You can choose multiple races as well. So to choose multiple races, you'll want to make sure that you press, I believe it's, I believe there's a field for multiple races right here. So if somebody presents as both like Native American and white, you want to make sure in this field you pick multiple races, and then it'll open up an additional field here. So this additional field, you will then put their races in. So we'll say for training purposes, this person identifies themselves as Native American and white. So you want to make sure to pick both. You can highlight both by pressing the control key and holding it down while you're clicking options. Hispanic and Latino will autofill as non-Hispanic, non-Latino. So an important fact, if they are considered Hispanic and Latino, most people will still mark themselves as white. It's an additional field on our intake form, so you've got to make sure that you know whether they filled that out or not. If they didn't fill that out and didn't check it, please don't assume, just click don't know. If they chose not to fill that out and they said something about it, you can click refuse. That's fine too. Sexual orientation, again, don't assume. Only pick a sexual orientation if you know for sure, if that's something that they discussed with you. So for this purpose, we'll say that this person told us that they were queer in some way, but they didn't identify how. Primary language will always, again, autofill to English. Please feel free to mark any of the other ones that would be true to them. Limited English proficiency means that English is not their first language. So if they are native Spanish speaker, but they speak fairly good English, you would still press yes. Just so then we know when we're talking to them that there might be some translation errors, but for the most part, they're able to communicate just fine. If you press yes on the limited English proficiency, please write that in the notes down below so that we kind of know what to expect. whether they speak any English, some English, or they speak English very well. That's something that we need to know because we need to know if we need an interpreter to talk to this client. And then marital status. So are they divorced, married? Are they just in a partnership and have been living with that person for a really long time? Single, separated, or maybe we don't know. For the client contact information over here, you want to enter in their phone number when we have it. Make sure you list which number is going to be their primary number. For the most part, I would guess that all of our clients are going to have a cell phone for the most part. So the cell phone would be their primary number that we would contact them at. So if we enter in the cell phone, I'm just going to enter in mine. Make sure that you click if it's safe to call or if it's safe to leave a message. If it's not safe or if there's restrictions, then make sure you type that in the box right here so that we know. So for example, maybe only call this client after work, so after 4 p.m. And then don't leave a message. So that way we can see right away when we look at the phone number box that restrictions apply to that phone number. We need to go in and read that before we contact them on that number. The address field is pretty self-explanatory. So we can keep track of all of their addresses, not just the one that they're currently staying at. So we could say that they're staying, this should always be the last address that they were staying at. So I'm typing in just the shelter address. If you know the zip code, it'll automatically populate the city. And then the county, make sure you use the counties that we serve up at the top with the asterisk next to them. You don't have to retype in the county or do a new one. Just make sure you use one of those three. The asterisk just means that it gets popped to the top of the list, so it's easier for people to find. And then we'll hit OK. So then no matter where they end up, we'll have that address listed. So if they say that, oh, I moved back to Clear Lake or something like that, and we need to mail something to them, we still have the address on file. If their mailing address is different than their home address, then that's why you would use the mailing address portion of this. Not a lot of clients do that, but it's useful for like smaller towns like Milltown where they might have a PO box instead of a physical mailing address. The emergency contacts are usually for individuals who are staying in shelter. So we'll want to make sure this is filled out with that primary emergency contact that they listed. So we only need the primary one in here. You don't necessarily have to put the second one under this tab. Instead, what we could do is we can enter that under the releases of information tab at the bottom here. So down to general information, a lot of this stuff in this column will be filled out when we do the intake for a new client. So you can pretty much ignore the top half of this here for now and skip right to the disability, which is if they needed any sort of a special accommodation. Again, if you don't know for sure, or if they just didn't mark that, just put unknown, don't make an assumption. Employment status is the same thing. We don't necessarily need to know their income and wage, although it is helpful. For example, when they're looking for housing with Betty, she might need to know that to know what income level they're at. But as far as everyday knowledge and just entering things into Osnium, we don't need to record that in here for us. And then any special classifications that they did on the intake form. Does the person identify as deaf? Did they list some sort of a physical or mental disability? Are they currently homeless? All of those things. And again, you can click multiple by holding down the control key. And when a person has identified as Native American, there's a space on their intake form for the tribe that they associate with. So these are all the tribes that we have listed. If they're from out of state or if they come from a tribe that isn't listed on here, you can feel free to hit the new tab and then enter in what tribe they are a part of. The client alert would usually be if they were to do something in shelter in which they would not be allowed back in shelter for some reason. And this would pop up every time you open their file in Osnium. So if there is a reason to check that, you would check that here. And then you would check the alert text down here. So what used to be, we would just type in here like see notes, but now they give us the note portion of it. So we can just type it all in here instead of having to take up the general note section down here. Okay. Any questions about just generally creating a new client? No? Okay. So we'll move on to what's called an intake. So anytime you fill out one of those folders with a client, you would do a new intake for that. So when they come into shelter and you fill out that yellow folder, that's an intake. When you go and meet somebody at the hospital and you fill out one of those teal folders, that's an intake. Leslie, when you go to the jail and they fill out like their initial paperwork with you, that would be an intake too. So all of those things are intakes. So when you're doing an intake, it's usually talking about a specific incident that happened to the client. So a sexual assault or domestic violence case, it would be like the last known incident that happened. So you would enter in the staff member, so who's doing the intake, the date of the intake, and then the date of the victimization. You might not always know the immediate date, or the client might not remember, so they might have to kind of guess that it was sometime in, it was sometime in April. So we'll just do April 1st, and then we'll click that again. It was estimated because they're not really sure. They don't remember. So the abuse status, it's either going to be the primary victim or the secondary victim. The only time it's not considered a victim is for the school groups that April does, or sometimes Leslie, they might not determine them or say that they're a victim when they do the jail group. Otherwise, they should all be the primary or secondary. So a primary victim means that something violent or something abusive happened to them. A secondary victim means that the violence or abuse didn't occur to them, but they're still directly affected by it. For example, children are automatically considered secondary victims when they come into shelter because they're being displaced due to the abuse. So for this instance, we'll say that this is a primary victim, so the abuse happened to her. And then the victimization type, a lot of times we just pick dual domestic violence and sexual assault because those go hand in hand. And somebody might disclose one or the other right away, and then later on through the process disclose the other part. But if you know for sure, because you have been working with this client for a while, you could go ahead and pick one of these other options here. So we're just going to say for the purpose of this that they're dual. They've experienced both domestic violence and sexual assault. Intimate partner violence means that this person is in a romantic relationship with the individual that abused them. So not like roommates, not a family member or anything like that, like an actual intimate relationship. And you could feel free to put don't know, no, or yes. And then what did they initially present with? So what was their what was their instance of abuse? Was it domestic violence related? Was it sexual assault related? Or like I said, with the jail group and with the children or the school groups specifically, it might be neither of those. So then they would pick that instead. We'll just say this person experienced domestic violence. Are they pregnant? Yes, no, or unknown. And we'll just say unknown, we don't know. They didn't disclose, we didn't ask. And then the types of abuse. So as you can see, there's a list of multiple victimizations that somebody could have experienced. These are throughout the lifetime. So it may or may not be directly related to the intake that they're doing right now. So let's say this person came to us and it's because their abuser choked them. So we're going to make sure to press adult physical assault because we know that it was an adult assault. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we pick domestic violence, spousal or partner, because it was, again, an intimate partner that did this to them. And we'll go ahead and mark strangulation down here as well. So then all of those forms of abuse, and this is a checklist. So you would just go through that checklist on the back and then mark any of the ones that they've checked. So the primary abuser, we have a list of abusers that we put in the system throughout the years. So you want to make sure that you look up this person first before you enter them, or else we get things like this where we have the same abuser listed twice. And while that isn't the worst thing that could possibly happen, it can skew our numbers by accident. So again, you want to make sure that you are typing in their name and that you know what their name is spelled like, so that you're not accidentally creating a person's file twice. If you start putting somebody into Osnium, start making a new client, and that person's already in Osnium, the system will prompt you and tell you that as long as you've spelled their name correctly. If you've noticed that you made a file and you messed up their first name and now there's two files, let me know, because I'm able to merge those files together and then we don't lose out on having to like delete a whole file if you've already been entering months worth of contact into this client. So I'm able to merge it. And then that way I would just pick one file or the other to be like the host file. And all of the information from both files would merge into that one. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick somebody for this person. And then the relationship to the abuser. So were they just an acquaintance? Like, were they dating, but not necessarily hadn't defined the relationship? Were they a current spouse or intimate partner, former, another family member or household member, all of those things. And again, the unknown field is there. So please feel free to use it. That way we still have information gathered and it's not just left blank, because funders hate it when we leave fields blank. The county of the incident is usually the same county in which they've lived in, unless the abuser drove them to another county to commit the crime, where you would note that too. So let's say that this person was like driven to Rice Lake and then assaulted. And then what was the incident location? 99% of the time it's going to be rural in these areas, because that's just what Polk, Barron, and Burnett counties are. They're rural areas. And then the assault location. So there are some that are listed here. Obviously, this isn't going to cover everything. So what we can do is press other here and then write in the specific location. So for the specific location, let's just say like it happened at the Walmart parking lot in Rice Lake, just because that's what came first to my mind. Why? I don't know, but here we are. So then it's going to ask, like, do you want to make this victimization record the primary one for Jane Doe? Yes. So then when we go back to the general information tab here, it'll fill in some of the information on the main victimization once we close out of this.
I have a question about the specific location.
Yeah.
Just because I've been, when it's like the victim's home or whatever, and that address has been put in, I've been just like retyping in the address and specific location because I happen to know that. Or are we supposed to be doing that? Or is
You
that
don't have
redundant?
to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you list it as like victim's home or whatever,
Mhm.
that should be the same as the address that they already have
Yeah.
listed.
Right.
Yeah, and so like we would know then from the intake date and then from the address listing that it was that address, because it would be
So I
on the
just leave
CPA.
it. I either leave it blank or I write victim's home again in specific then,
You could
or
just, yeah, so if you pick like assault locations, victim's home, you can just leave it
Mhm.
blank.
Okay, great.
We'd be able to tell from the intake date that you entered this, and then from the date under their address in the like address tab, that that was the
Hmm.
same place.
Yeah, I thought so. Felt kind of redundant. All right,
Yeah,
thanks.
yep. Because then it would be under this address history and the date changed.
Okay.
And it can feel kind of redundant. Like if you do multiple intakes or something like that for the same client, it's still important because every time they do an intake, you're updating all of their information and rechecking their files. So you should still do it, even if all the information seems the same. Because you
Right.
might gather a new piece of information that you didn't have from the last intake.
Okay.
So services. So every time you talk to a client, anytime you support a client, contact them, whatever, it's called a service in Osnium. So that's otherwise known as activities. I always get the two confused because I can never remember what it used to be called. So entering an activity, entering a service, entering a contact, those are all the same things. It means the same thing. So to do this, you would press the new, which is this piece of paper over in the left-hand corner. I keep having to drag it over because it loads in the wrong monitor for me. So again, all of these red fields are necessary fields that need to be filled in. So you're not going to be able to save it if those fields are left. And it'll tell you what you need to fill in. So right now I tried to save it and it's telling me activity session must not be empty. So something on here is empty and it shouldn't be. And this is right here, the service site. Couple of things about this. You just need to put in the duration. You don't have to always change the exact time that a contact occurred. I wouldn't expect anybody to remember that. That level of notes, that's astronomical. There's no way. So if you could just change the duration to make sure you know how long you talk to somebody, that's fine. It doesn't have to be you talk to this person for sure at 2 p.m. So the program is usually non-residential, emergency shelter. Those are the only two that we provide here. So either they live in shelter or they don't. Um, Outreach program is not the same thing. Outreach program would suggest that we would be in their community doing like a mobile crisis situation, and we're not usually doing that. So just use non-residential or emergency shelter. Method of contact. So this is where you get those other forms of communications with clients. So texting, emails, phone calls, all of those can be changed in here. So for this, we're going to say that we talk to this person on the phone because then I'm going to show you guys how to enter a hotline call too. So we're going to say we talk to this person on the phone for an hour. And then the service site is just wherever you made the contact from. So if they are a non-residential client and they called you at the office, like it would be either the main office or the outreach offices. So it would be the Rice Lake or the oh my gosh, Siren. Yeah, there you go. The Siren office. Um, so for this one, we'll just put main office. The services provided, here's where it can get kind of tricky because you can do multiple services in one contact group. So let's say this person called us and they wanted some referrals and we're just talking to us about their situation in general. Like this is our initial contact phone call. So for that, we would kind of go through this list and we'd pick out all of the things that we talked about. So maybe during this conversation, we talked about safety planning. We would make sure that we highlight that. Maybe during this conversation, we talked about some legal advocacy and some restraining order options with them. We would pick that. Maybe during this conversation, we offered some referrals to other supports and services in the area. We would make sure to highlight that. So we would have to make sure that we highlight all of these fields. So anything that you feel like you discussed with that client in that phone call needs to be addressed here in this list.
Assistance with obtaining RO. Did you get that one yet?
Nope, I missed that one. I knew I was missing one and I was looking for it and I couldn't see it on I couldn't see it on the list. Thank you.
And I think often we should be doing some type of safety planning. You should see
Yes.
that fair amount of quite a bit on new phone calls.
Yep, especially with your first initial contact, almost all the time. Anytime you ask them about their safety, like, is it safe for me to talk, or is it safe for me to leave a message, or anything regarding their safety, you should be marking safety planning on your services provided.
Yeah.
Because I've chosen information and referral, then I need to fill out this section where it talks about the referrals that I provided. So make sure that anytime you say that you provided a referral, you're saying who that referral was to. There's a list of pre-made fields in here. You don't have to get super detailed. So if you, for example, if you referred them to an attorney, you don't have to say which attorney necessarily. There's a field here that just says legal, and that's fine. You don't have to do a bunch of other stuff. Otherwise, you could say like, okay, so I referred them to legal, but I also referred them to another domestic violence shelter because maybe we were full at the time of the phone call. Or you could say that I also referred them to food share because they're having problems affording groceries or something like that. So just make sure that you're filling this out as accurately as possible, but you don't have to enter in something new for every single agency that you refer to. It's perfectly fine to choose something like other and then just write it in the notes, or non-governmental human services.
Quick question. If I do information, but I didn't refer, do I still use the information and referral tab?
It depends on what you're giving information for.
Well, let's say it's not legal. Let's say it's information about let me think of something. What normally happens if they come into shelter? Like, what does it look like?
Okay, so for that, you wouldn't pick information and referral as the service. Instead, you would probably enter that one in as personal advocacy.
So are you saying that if I ever do information referral, I have to have a referral?
Yes.
So basically it's not info, it's just referral.
Well, it could be information about that referral, but yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, you could probably still do information and referral. And then for the referral section, you could still check DV shelter.
And whenever we have any contact, aren't we doing personal advocacy?
Basically, yeah, because that's any everyday conversation with a client. You could do personal advocacy.
One more question. What happens when I just call and I leave a message for them? How do I capture that?
So if you're just calling and leaving a message, you would kind of fill it out the exact way that I would do this way. But in services provided, I think it's called follow-up contact.
Okay. So that's the only one we use on that.
Yep.
So I have it doing it.
Me too.
So again, if you make a mistake, you're not going to be able to delete this. What you can do if you make a mistake is you can go in and edit your own. And I can say, shoot, this didn't actually happen on this day. It happened last Wednesday. And then you can go in and you can fix that. You can't edit anybody else's. So if you notice somebody else has made a mistake, make sure you let them know that. So like what I see most often is somebody will accidentally mess up the date because they'll type it in instead of like trying to pick it off the calendar, and they'll say like this contact happened in 2029 or something like that. So you'll have to let that person know that they made an error, and then kind of just hope that they fix that or let me know so I can double check it and make sure that it's correct later.
Okay, and then you gotta always do save and close or save.
Yep, save and close or save because you want to make sure that it's saving to Osnium correctly. The other thing is, I highly recommend that you don't open a bunch of client tabs at the same time. I know some people prefer to do it that way, but what happens is if two people have the same client tab open at the same time and are editing the same file, only one of you is going to be able to save it. So you've got to make sure that you're closing out of your tabs when you're done with your contacts with that person, or else you're potentially messing with somebody else's entry because they're not going to be able to save it.
What if you've saved already, but you still have their tab open? Like I constantly save, but I have their tabs open. Will that still keep someone else from being able to save?
No.
Okay, okay.
And the way to double check that at the end of the day is just to click out, pretend like you're clicking out of the whole system, and then what it'll catch whatever you didn't save. Like if Bree were right now to click out of the whole thing, like she's closing out Osnium, it's gonna pop up with a can you do it? There it is. Do you want
You
to
want to
save?
save changes, and you would either hit yes or no or cancel.
You would see the tab of where the changes were too.
Next, I'm going to go ahead and just go down the line and do what's called a stay. So this is entering a stay into the emergency shelter. So again, we'll just hit new here. So again, the admission time isn't as important as the date. So you don't have to monkey around with changing it to the exact time as long as you have the date correct. The stay type, typically the only thing that we do is emergency shelter. Obviously, we don't go to their house to stay. We don't have transitional housing, and it's very rare that we use a hotel or motel voucher. Betty, you might use this field once in a while if we put somebody in a motel for your program through the RRH, but otherwise it's always emergency shelter. The stay location, basically everybody else is going to be doing the main shelter. Betty, yours might be other, and then you might have to type in the name of the hotel.
Okay.
The funder is almost always multiple funders. Again, Betty, you would be HUD. So everybody else would use multiple funders for this. And then the prior living situation. Where did they stay before they came into shelter? Were they staying in somebody's house? Were they renting their own unit? Did they own their own house? And if they did own a house, or if they did have like a rental unit, were they paying the mortgage by themselves, or did they have a program that was helping them out with that? So like, let's say this person was renting, but they did not have any sort of subsidy, so they didn't have any sort of help with that. We would click rental by client, no ongoing housing subsidy. This VASH housing subsidy, I believe that that's veterans related. And then anything else like West Cap services, for example, would be the non-VASH.
Where was that field at?
This one is the prior living situation.
Prior living situation, okay. But we don't, do we normally fill out that? Doesn't Brandy normally fill that out?
Brandy does sometimes, but there's no reason why we can't. So if we know what we're doing, we can fill that out and make her job a little bit easier. Like if we did the shelter intake, I'm comfortable personally with filling this part out, you know. I don't necessarily expect people to, but it could make it a little bit easier if we did. And then why did they come into shelter? Where did they hear about us from? Was it another DV or SA program because that program was full, so they referred them to us? Was it through law enforcement because it was a lap call, for example, for this one, we'll just say that it was like a self-referral. That just means that they already knew about our services in some way, shape, or form, and they were like, I'm gonna call CRA. For like a lot of our past clients, it would be self-referral because they already know about our services. And then discharge information is when they exit. So whether they exit the motel stay, Betty, for you, or whether they exit the shelter for the rest of us. So the date of that. Again, you don't have to fill in the exact time. It'll autofill in 12 a.m. for that, and that's fine. If they leave the same day, so like if they come into shelter and then they decide to exit shelter later that night, you're going to want to change the time to later than their admission time. Otherwise, it's not going to save. So if I did like the same day and I tried to save it like this, it's not going to work. It has to be after the time. So I would have to change this to like 4 p.m. or something to make sure that it's later than their admission time. And then reason for leaving is why did they leave? Abandoned shelter means that they left the shelter and we haven't been able to get a hold of them for at least 3 days. Did they complete the program, which would mean like, oh, they found housing, for example, with Betty. Like they left the hotel because they found a house to stay in. Did they have a disagreement with somebody? Did they just find someplace else to live? All that kind of stuff. Did they return to their abuser? All of those. And then if we don't know, just hit unknown or disappear. And then where did they go? If we know this information, then we can fill this out. When clients are asked to leave shelter, we don't usually know this information. And again, that's fine. In that instance, if they chose not to tell us, we can hit client refused, or we could do client does not know. Because sometimes they genuinely don't know where they're going right away. If we do know the information, feel free to fill that out. Betty and Brandy will have additional fields in here, like the HUD HMIS stuff. That's for you guys to fill out. With anybody that does coordinated entry would have stuff to enter into these 2 fields. Okay, so if you remember when I entered in my service, I entered that in as a phone call. So every time you enter in a contact or a service or activity, whatever you want to call it, anytime you enter that in as a phone call, you got to make sure that you have a related call to that. So in a client file, the related calls are up here over the child and dependent tab. So we'll click on that and click on new. Yeah. It doesn't like that I'm an administrator, so it warns me a lot. It only likes to have one administrator, but Cherry and I are both admins.
So that's why it wants you.
Yeah, so every time I try to do stuff, it yells at me and it's like, hey, this isn't really recommended. I'm like, yep, I know. All right. So I said in this activity that I did that this phone call took an hour. So I'm going to want to make sure under the hotline call that this also took an hour. And you'll notice that in here, instead of hours, the durations are in minutes. So I'm going to want to do 60 minutes. And then what type of call was this? This was information and referral. And then you can see there's different types of information and referral. So there's the walk-in, which is like you're working the front desk and somebody just walks in and asks about shelter or asks about our services. The web-based, which would be like somebody got our email and sent us an email, or if somebody messaged our Facebook, that would be web-based. And then outgoing would be us calling them. So Deneen, that follow-up contact you were talking about, if you called them to leave a message, you would also do a hotline call like this and choose outgoing contact. So the caller type, This would be if it's not the victim or survivor calling, it's somebody calling on their behalf. So this field can be left blank depending on who was calling. So if their therapist were calling that, you would choose agency or professional because they're calling on the survivor's behalf. But if it's them calling themselves, then you would leave that blank. The county would be the county that their address is in most likely, or the county that they were currently calling from if they give us that information. If they don't give us that information, just assume that it's the county in which they live. Abuse status should be the same as their intake. The victimization type should be the same as their intake. So we did dual for that. The funder automates to VOCA. That's fine. You can go ahead and leave that. The referral source, again, this would be like if it's their first contact, most likely. It would probably be from one of these fields. Otherwise, if they're a current client or have been a client in the past, it's probably just going to be from themselves. They already knew about us. They knew about our services, so they knew to call us. The method of contact, there's different choices here. So they could do an email to us out of the blue. They could have shown up, like I said, at the front doors randomly. They could have messaged us on social media. So make sure you choose one of these. Most likely it's going to be phone or text message. And the service location, I said this person was non-residential, so we're just going to go ahead and do a main office. The reported abuser, if you have this information, you'll want to make sure that you connect that right away. Again, make sure you look to see if the person is already in here before you decide to re-enter that individual. People can have multiple abusers, so make sure you're choosing the right one as well. And then under call result, did they ask for shelter? Yes, no, and were they approved for shelter? So under the shelter result, we could say like, oh, a space wasn't available. We referred them somewhere else. They were inappropriate for shelter because they were homeless at the time of the call. They were denied because of another reason, or they were approved for shelter. And then what was the call outcome? So ultimately what happened with the call? Did they become a client? Were they approved for shelter? Did they assess services? Sometimes you might have like multiple things you could choose for this, and that's perfectly fine. Just choose the one that you feel like fits best. So for this instance, I have a shelter stay attached to this client, so I'm going to click approved for shelter. But I could just as easily have chosen became a client or needs met. And then did you do a safety plan with this client? Meaning, did you talk to them about their individual safety? Yes or no? Most of the time, if it's a new client, we probably have talked about safety in some capacity. So you'd choose yes. And then the notes field, this is where you would write information about the phone call, you know, so any pertinent info that you could feel or that you feel would be useful to another individual to know. So I could say like, so-and-so called because of this reason, you know, their abuser did this, this, and this during the incident that they described. Like if it's for shelter or not, it helps in here to write like, they were approved for shelter by myself and another staff member. So you could write who did first and second approval. And then the call reasons. So why did this person call us in the first place? Did they call because they were fleeing an abuser? Did they call because they needed information? Did they have safety concerns? Most of the time, if they're seeking shelter, it's probably going to be all three of these because they're most likely seeking a safe place to stay. And then if you offered them a referral, where was that referral to? I'm going to say DV shelter because I suggested that they come into shelter. And again, you can pick multiple things. I don't remember what all I picked anymore from the last one. So just gonna do a bunch of these and hit okay. And then once again, once you're done with that, you're gonna wanna make sure you save and close out of it. Any questions about like the client files in general? Do all the tabs make sense to people?
Just for the funder, I think I was under the impression that we always picked Voca, but then you said multiple funders. And then on the related call, I saw you put Voca, and I didn't really hear what you said. Do we get
So
specific ever with that, or?
no, so like on the hotline calls, it always automates to Voca. You just don't have to change it.
Oh, I got
Um,
you.
the only one that doesn't automate on is a shelter stay. So then you can choose multiple funders on that.
Okay.
To me, it does matter, but it doesn't matter. Because certain activities or services or whatever you want to call them are mapped to certain funders regardless. So when I run a report, as long as it's entered into Osnium, it'll pull up under all of the funders that fund that specific service. Um, so I don't really feel the need to like nitpick that function, as
Okay.
long as there's something in that field.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna save Jane Doe even though she's not real because I can just delete her afterwards because I want to show you how the hotline call will come up. So here's her hotline call. It's bumped to the top because I have my Osnium listed to start with the newest start dates first. For the hotline tab, you don't necessarily have to do it this way. This is just how I benefit from it personally. So you'll want to make sure that you sort it according to what works for you personally. And you can change these tabs at any time. So they don't have to be in this particular order. So if you would rather have the existing client, so whether or not they've communicated with us before, at the end, you could left click and just drag it all the way over here. And the nice part is this saves automatically. So I could change all of this kind of stuff and then close out of Osnium. And if I open it back up, it'll still look like this on the hotline caller. And it's unique to each user. So how it's laid out for mine isn't going to be the same way it's laid out for Jen's or Denise's. If you want to add columns, and this is getting pretty pretty detailed here and a little advanced, you can do that though. If you choose to add or take away columns, that is something that you could certainly try. For example, sometimes we get people that call but won't give us their name, but did give us a phone number. That's why we have the phone number tab here, so then we can look people up by their phone number. So like I can choose to enter that field or get rid of that field by doing the following. You right click it like this and choose hide this column if you don't want to see it anymore. And then that gets rid of it. And then if I wanted to bring that back, I would go to the ribbon here, right click, column chooser, and then you can see all of the different areas that you can add. So I got rid of the phone number. This is in alphabetical order. So I'm going to scroll down here and see where it says add phone number here. I'm just going to double left click that. And here it is, it came back. And you can add any of these that you want at any time. So let's say I also wanted to add the safety plan. I would just click on that, double click it, and then that adds. So if I wanted to do a new hotline call, but they're not a client yet, so they haven't done intake paperwork with us yet, we could still do that. Or if they decided not to give us their name, we could still enter in that hotline call. So again, there's these fields outlined in red. We have to fill those in. It would be pretty much the exact same way we did Jane Doe's. So let's say this person, they didn't call, somebody else called for them. So we're going to say like, oh, this was information and referral. let's just say this was a lap call, just for practice, right? So the caller type then would be law enforcement because it was a law enforcement officer calling on behalf of a victim of domestic violence. The county, let's say it was Polk. Abuse status, we'll just go ahead and say that it was not the victim because it was a law enforcement officer. Maybe in this instance, we didn't talk to the victim. They chose not to talk to us, but law enforcement still had to call us. And then the victimization type, we knew from talking to the officer, say that it was domestic violence. The referral source, again, law enforcement called us. And the location was our main shelter. So then in the call notes, we would type in like what answers or what questions they answered yes to. So then we would do like so-and-so or initials of the victim answered yes to questions. I don't even remember how many questions are on this. 2, 6, and 7.
Yeah, or wait a minute, there's 8.
Denise's gonna tell me I'm wrong. It's okay.
No.
I'm sorry. I haven't had a lap call in a real long time.
You're fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So then in the call notes, like you would write general information, like who was the responding officer, what municipality were they from, what was the name or at least the initials of the offender and of the victim. Did you talk to the victim or not? All of that information would go into the call notes section here. And then Deneen, help me out. When it comes to like the first name, last name, do we put LAP in front of it?
I think we do LAP and then the Amory PD or Polk Sheriff, and then the name are the initials of the person.
Okay.
And that viewing binder that's by the front
Yeah,
desk
it
has
shows
right
that.
on the back of that shows exactly how to enter that stuff. I use it every time, so
Perfect.
I'm gonna go grab that so we
it's
can.
super helpful. Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah, because I know that we have to put LAP somewhere in here so that it
Mhm.
pops up automatically because it's easier for reporting purposes, but I don't remember if it's in the first
Yeah.
name or the last name field.
Yeah. And I use that binder so much I wouldn't be able to remember.
Right.
Mhm.
And then to make a caller anonymous, we can just check anonymous caller here. So if they just refuse to give their name, you can enter in creeper calls, by the way. So like if you get a creeper call, it still took up your time. You could still
Okay.
enter that.
That would
Don't
be
that-
helpful if we have the creeper call number as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Because if we can get that recorded, then we know not, well, I mean, we'd still have to pick up, but we know not to entertain that in the future.
We would put it in as crisis call with law enforcement, and no, right there under first name, you're gonna do the LAP, the town and PD, and then the name of victim, but we might only have the initials of the victim. And then under call reasons, you'd put safety concerns.
Okay. Perfect.
And then, like you said, you would put all the yes answers.
Yep.
Yep. And then call outcome would be subject to whatever the outcome of that call was under call outcome.
Right. For this, I just put approved for shelter because we'll say like, oh, we told this person that they could certainly come into shelter based on their answers, and maybe they chose not to.
And if we talk to the victim, we better also add that we did do a safety plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that there's a new option on here to convert call to client. So if we fill out all of this information and then click that, it'll automatically start to make a new client, like I just showed you how to do earlier. Does that make sense to everybody? I'll show you. So like I clicked that button, convert call to client. So now it's making a new client based off of the information I just put into this hotline. So obviously there wasn't very much for it to go off of, but you could see like the first name transferred, for example. if you put the phone number, that would transfer. So you can make a client off of a hotline call.
Which is, yeah. it is nice.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So let's say when I'm working with someone on the phone and a few days later, I make them a client, I can go into their old hotline and do, create, convert call to client and then,
Yep.
okay.
That way you don't have to start all over because you already have a bunch of their information.
Their info, yeah.
You could also make a client over the phone. While you can't necessarily get all of their signatures for the necessary paperwork, eventually you'd have to talk to them in person. Like just to get the ball rolling, you could start filling out some of the information over the phone and have a physical file started for them. I know, Deneen, you've done that before when you've had to.
Yeah, I have.
It's not ideal, but it's doable.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can go to the events tab now. Maybe if it loads, we can go to the events tab now. Okay, so this is where all of our like meetings, trainings, stuff like that goes into this events tab, as well as like our fundraisers. So you can kind of see like whenever we go to a meeting, whenever we have like a presentation or something like that scheduled, or we do an informational booth somewhere, all of that information would be entered in here. So again, you would just go to the new option up here on the upper left and do new event. So again, you don't really have to mess around with the start time and end time necessarily, as long as you have the duration. So I'm gonna enter in our staff meeting right now. So I will go ahead and just put 2 hours. Might not take 2 hours, it might take an hour and a half, but still, I'm gonna put it in as 2 hours. So then I have that entered in there. Name of the event would be CRA staff meeting. The event type. This is where it can get tricky sometimes. So for community and outreach and education, that would be something that we're going out and doing out into the community. That is specifically geared towards like the services that we do and provide. Girls group would be like our group that we do in the schools. A meeting would be a meeting between us and another service provider, most likely, with or without a client present. And that meeting would have to be something directly regarding like client services in some way. Otherwise, it's known as what's called a networking meeting. A networking meeting would be when you're with other service providers, but it's not necessarily about a client. So for example, like I attend a bunch of networking meetings where I get together with other directors and we just talk about policy, that kind of stuff. That would be a networking meeting. Prevention education would be when we go in and we talk about ways to prevent domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, all of that kind of stuff. So like, for example, during the school year, usually Osceola will have us and SART come in and do like sexual assault prevention presentations to all of their freshmen in high school. And we'll talk to them kind of about like, you know, good choices, staying safe, all that kind of stuff, healthy consent, boundaries, all that. Professional training is like when Deneen goes and trains law enforcement on how to respond to domestic violence and sexual assault calls. So it would be us training another professional on something. LAP as well would be considered like professional training. Like if Deneen and I were to go and do a refresher or whatever it's called for law enforcement, we would put that under professional training.
We can't, as advocates, we can't do LAP training. We can do an introduction, but we can't actually do their training that they need. Law enforcement has to train law enforcement. We can do an introduction to it though.
We'd put that under professional training in Osnium, but you're right, we can't technically do the training.
Yeah, just so you're aware.
Okay. The public awareness would be like when we set up those like booths or whatever for domestic violence awareness month and stuff like that at the Justice Center. So we would do like a resource table. Other event, media event would be like when I go to the radio station and do an ad or do some sort of an interview online or something like that. That would be under media event. The resource tables would also be like National Night Out. Those were all resource tables. Anything like that, anything that brings our name out into the public in general. Staff meeting would be like what we're doing today. And then staff training would be like any sort of training you attend, whether it's online or in person. So like if you do a webinar, that would go under staff training. And then volunteer training would be you training a volunteer on CRA services. So this one we'll do staff meeting. The focus is almost always dual DVSA unless it's specific to a grant. For example, Deneen recently did a training for service providers on elder abuse responses. So she would choose elder abuse for that because it's specific to that victimization. But for this, we'll just choose dual DVSA. Funder again, just multiple funders is perfectly fine. Location, I'm going to do Zoom/main office. And then you can add any of the staff members that are attending. So Betty's here, I'm here, Deneen, Jamie, Jen, Leslie, Roberta, Becky. Oh, I just saw Becky waving her arms. I didn't forget you, Becky. So then we're all listed under here. And then notes, like I'm not writing notes, obviously, but Deneen is, so once I snipe those from her, I might come back in and type those in later.
Hang on, I can tell you that you set out the September schedule. Reminded us September 10 is National DV Count Day. Make sure we get into Osnium. You also said fill in and share your online calendar. Next staff meeting is September 29, and then you went into an Osnium training.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll give you my notes.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just gonna write Osnium 101 and recap of September.
Yep.
Schedule email. Because that email had all my reminders in it because I don't have a very good memory.
Okay.
The participants tab down here. So this is most important if you're giving some sort of presentation or attending some sort of networking event, so then we can know who came to the table for that.
Sure.
So like if you know, then you can feel free to choose specifically who was there. So you would write in like, I know that at this meeting, there were 2 people from CPS. So you would do Child Protective Services, number of participants 2. If you don't know, then there is a multidisciplinary option. So like Deneen, for example, obviously there were a lot of different kinds of service providers at your training. You might or might not know where everybody came from or remember, you just choose that. Or if like it's not otherwise covered in here, but you have a note of like everybody's names, then you could choose other, and then in the note section, just write who everybody was. But for this, I'm going to leave this blank because I already listed who the participants were over in the staff section. Did anybody have any questions about events?
No.
Okay. For the big fundraisers, you don't have to enter those in individually. One person will enter that fundraiser. So for example, like Purse Bingo is already done. Well, gosh, Becky. So purse bingo should already be in here. None of these are mine, sorry. And we can kind of see what everybody did for it as well. So any of those big fundraisers and stuff like that, one person will go ahead and enter in all that information. You don't have to all do it individually. You guys still with me?
Yep. Still with you.
Yeah, this is long, I know.
Yeah.
No, this is good though. This is really helpful.
Yeah.
Good. So running reports. This is fun. This is good. We're gonna love this part. So this can look a little bit intimidating. For the most part, I do a lot of the reports on my own, but it is nice to be able to do your own just to kind of see where the gaps are in your entry. So most of the reports are called flex reports. And there's one for each different type of like tab that we have. So we can do an events one that'll pull up all of the events for a certain time period. Same with hotlines, referrals, stays, volunteer time, waiting lists. If you go down to this Flex Reports 2023 and hit the plus here,
I can see it.
this is where we get crazy. You can pull up the services Flex Report. So 98% of the time, if I ask you to run a report, or if I say I'm going to run your report, this is the report that I'm talking about, the services Flex Report. So the services Flex Report will do all of the reporting for whatever time period you tell it to do. For the purposes of this training, I'm just going to do 1 month and show you what that looks like so that it's not too overwhelming to go through. And you can filter this in whatever way you want. So you can choose to do only yourself. So from the staff member list, you can hit these 3 dots in the right-hand corner here. And you can choose yourself off of this list. So then it would only show information pertinent to you. So stuff that you entered. For this, I'm going to do everybody just so you can see what I kind of look at. And then I'm going to hit submit. So make sure you fill in a start date and an end date. For this, I just did July 1st to July 31st. It takes a while, so don't get too disheartened if you hit load and nothing happens for a bit. But you can kind of see, this is a snapshot, so you can see that there's 189 records, there were 31 clients, 104 hours, and 267 services that were entered for the month of July. You can hit show details up at the top here, and that'll show you like every single contact or service or whatever that happened. An important note, these client numbers, this is not their client file number. This is their Osnium person ID. So again, this is not their client file number. This is the ID that Osnium assigned them. So if you're like, what the heck is that? I don't remember that. You're going to have to look up their Osnium ID, not their agency ID. So their person ID. I'm just going to hide these, but. So it breaks it up by like non-residential, residential, who was staying in emergency shelter, were they adults, were they children, their ages. And again, you can filter all of this too. So like if I wanted to run this report, but I only wanted to look at people that would be considered elders for that elder grant, then I would choose the parameters that allowed me to look at the 25 to 59 and the 60 plus. So that would narrow down my numbers, but then I would have more pertinent information for that specific grant. So this is how I run reports to figure out the numbers that I need for each grant funder. So this tells me how many services were run during this month. It tells me that we only had 1 law enforcement interview. but it took 3 hours. This tells me that we're saying exams. Oh, I don't see any.
We had no sane exams.
No sane exams then. But I can see that apparently we helped one person file a restraining order that took 2.5 hours.
Obviously, all my shit's not in there.
And this is how we figure it out, because we run the report and then we see that, oops, there's a gap. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
to shame anybody. It's just a quick way to kind of figure out, oh,
I
okay.
didn't know that, okay, we got some problems.
Yeah.
Or we got some data not entered.
Yep.
So
It'll show
when,
you. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I got a question, when we pick multiple things that we're doing, does it divide up our time? Let's say we pick that we did a safety plan and assisted with an RO. And I always pick personal advocacy, so there'd be 3 things on that. And I did it for 3 hours. Would it designate 1 hour to each thing, or it would designate 3 hours to each category?
3 hours to each category.
Okay. Okay, and that way, if you wanted to address a category.
Yep. So then if you did like case manage or not case management, if you did like group, but you also did safety planning, but you also did life skills education, you did those all for 2 hours, it would add 2 hours to each pool.
Each category, okay.
Yep.
That's what I was wondering what it would do.
Yep, that's how that reads. And then if I want to really look at like each staff member and how the entry is going, then I would scroll down here to staff member, and I would be like, okay, so Becky had 77 contacts with 10 clients for a total of 20 hours.
Okay.
So I know that her numbers probably look pretty correct, whereas like, not to shame Brandy, but if I go to Brandy's, it says that she only had contact with one person for half an hour. Well, I know that's not right. There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way Brandy only talked to one person for half an hour in all of July. So I would just tell her like, hey, I ran a report and I didn't see much entry for you for this month. So then I would know that.
I see a lot that look shy.
Huh?
I see a lot of people that look shy.
Yeah.
Judgy judger.
Well, no, because I just know that they definitely have done more than what is up there.
Yep. So then we kind of know, looking at these reports, if you're like, shoot, did I enter that? Did I not enter that? You could run one of these reports, filter through your own name, and then kind of find that contact that way.
Yeah, realize what's short. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It even breaks down everything from like the intakes too. So it'll talk about like how many people experienced domestic violence versus how many people experienced sexual assault, all that kind of stuff. It gets as detailed as you want it to be.
Okay.
And then if you only want certain information, you would just make sure you fill out that parameter. Like if I only wanted to look at people from Amory, for example, because Amory Community Foundation is one of the reports I just had to do, I would double click Amory and I would hit submit. And then it's only going to show me people from Amory that we served in July.
Okay.
So it's really useful for me, as long as all of the information is updated correctly.
As long as it's in, that's
As long as it's in, I can pull it up however I need to. And I get pretty dang detailed a lot of the time to fill out what's being asked of me as far as funding goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is how you run one of those service reports. For the most part, you're either just going to use the services flex report, or you're going to use one of these guys up here, depending on what you're looking for or what you want to run. Do you guys want me to show you how to use the other flex reports? Because the services one is the most detailed. Otherwise, it's all the same basic format, but with different information.
So like,
Sure, if we're gonna have to run those, yeah.
oh,
Huh?
say that again.
I just said sure if we're gonna need to know how to run those other ones, then yeah. Mhm.
Do we need
Maybe.
to know how to run the other ones?
I'll show you how to run the stays one at least. I can't imagine you guys would have to run the
Yeah,
hotline or events, but like shelter stays maybe.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the shelter stay report. So as you can see, a lot of these are the same on the left. I'm gonna leave the start date and end date as just the month of July, so you can kind of see what it looks like. So these are all of the contacts we had with all of the people in shelter through the month of July. So you can see we had 14 clients in shelter during that month. There were 302 nights spent in shelter with an average of 21 nights per client. And then it breaks down the number of bed nights.
oh, between adult and child.
Yep. New and returning clients mean like just have they been in shelter before? And then it kind of breaks it down by, again, the referral source, like where did they live before they came into shelter? And it'll even tell you exactly what contacts we did or what services we provided them with. I feel like I passed it. Maybe not. I don't print these because I feel like I would kill trees, but you could always print them if you wanted to, just to have them to reference. As far as those of you that like I require monthly reports from, I think I would rather have you just run an Osnium report than fill out the monthly report form. If that makes sense.
So just make sure everything's in Osnium.
Yep. Yep. Am I losing my mind? Why am I not seeing the actual services? This video is just going to be me looking for things.
So it's just super important we're capturing everything to justify our existence.
Yes, capture the way that she searches through
Yep.
all these. It's enlightening.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a lot of scrolling and a lot of being confused about things.
Patient,
I don't know if patient is the right word, but
trying to find the silver
yeah,
lining.
Is Control F available on those reports? Because that's always
maybe.
that's always my friend.
Honestly, it probably is. I feel like I've searched those a bunch of times. Or if I get really mad, I just filter it out to only the thing I need to see. Because I'm
Just
like, I'm
watching
done
mini
searching.
reports.
Yeah, because it's like a multi-page report every time I need to look for something.
Right.
So I think that was it as far as like the Osnium training goes. If there's other things that people want or need as far as what you need to put into Osnium, or if you had questions about anything that you saw today, I'm going to upload this video to that YouTube channel and then share it with everybody again. That way you guys can go back and look. And then the people who weren't here could watch it in their own time, you know, whenever they work next and write notes, whatever makes it easiest for them. Hopefully I answered some questions today.
And the channel's private, right?
Yes, the video is private, so you'll only be able to get to it through that link.